Welcome into Leaked and Loaded. I'm your host, Dylan Leak, and I'm going to be breaking down everything from the college football world in week 14. We're going to go over all the big games, recap everything that happened, talk about some college football playoffs. If you're new to this channel, make sure to like and subscribe. It's a new channel. We broke off from our podcast, the Slobberknocker Sports podcast. So make sure if you don't follow us over there, go check out our podcast at Slobberknocker Sports. But let's jump into this, and we're going to break down all the games, and we'll start on Friday with the Texas A&M rivalry. It was gone for 14 years. It's been back for 2, and for the second straight season, the Longhorns win by 10. They won 17-7 in College Station last year. This year, they take down the Aggies, the undefeated Texas A&M Aggies, 27-17. They were down 10-3 at halftime, won the second half 24-7. They dominated the second half, and it was led by Arch Manning, and he played, okay, but really made some big plays at the end of the game, specifically with his legs, and I thought that was kind of the difference. A lot of this year, especially since Arch got the concussion in the Mississippi State game, he's been a little reluctant to run as much, and I thought Steve Sarkisian, for the most part this year, didn't utilize Arch's legs as much as he probably should have. Now, how much of that is him protecting Arch from himself, knowing, his draft stock, at least early in the year, knowing that, they don't have a backup, whereas last year Arch was the backup to Quinn. They don't have that same luxury this year, so I understand protecting him a little bit, but was surprised that we didn't see more designed Arch Manning runs this season. But we did see Arch use his legs a ton. I think a big concern going into this game for Texas was, are they going to be able to protect against that A&M defensive front? And while they did get pressure early on, the offensive line stepped up big in the second half, and Arch did a great job of extending plays and using his legs. He obviously had the huge touchdown run late after A&M cut the lead back down to 3. Texas had a huge response, and Arch ran him for 40-plus yards out to kind of seal it. Defense was phenomenal. Obviously, they picked off Marcel Reed twice on the final 2 possessions. Final 2 throws of the game for Marcel were interceptions, and that essentially sealed the win for Texas. From the A&M standpoint, not the end of the world, right? They came into the game 11-0, number 3 in the country. The loss does cost them a chance to play in the SEC title game. Now it will be Alabama, Georgia playing in Atlanta next week. So A&M rather, still seeking that first SEC title game appearance. It will not happen this year, despite a heck of a regular season. Probably going to cost them a first-round bye, and that's kind of the big takeaway if you're looking at this from A&M's perspective. Because if A&M wins this game and loses in the SEC championship game to Georgia or Alabama, very likely A&M still gets a bye. By losing this game to Texas and losing it in the fashion that they did by double digits, kind of getting outplayed the entire second half, I think it's pretty safe to say A&M will drop out of the top 4. We're going to see them likely host a first-round playoff game, but their road just got significantly more difficult. They're now going to have to win 4 games to win a national championship. And this was the issue with A&M all year. We didn't really know what they were. They were tested somewhat early in the year against Notre Dame, before Notre Dame was playing as well as they are now. That game very well could have been won and probably should have been won by Notre Dame. A missed extra point late in the game opened the door for the Aggies, and they had to convert a 4th and 13 on basically the final play of the game, which they did. Scored, kicked the extra point. There was a missed egregious hold on that final play as well that a lot of Notre Dame fans remember. But that was the last time we've really seen the Aggies play anyone, worth a darn. They played the bottom of the SEC all season long. This was the first legitimate team they played. They did have to play Missouri, but with Missouri's 3rd-string quarterback. And so this was the first healthy ranked team that they saw, and they lost by double digits. So if you're an A&M fan, I think there is cause for concern here. The offense, when Marcel Reed is under pressure and he's forced to be a passer under duress, he's not very good. Under 55% completion when pressured this season. And get him off his mark, and he's having to throw and not able to use his legs and run. It's a big issue for A&M. And the defense was unable to get stops the entire second half against the Texas offense that really isn't that great. On the other side, I want to talk about Texas in the college football playoff because after the game, Steve Sarkisian was asked why his team deserved to be in the college football playoff. And I thought he gave a really good answer. And it's the answer that is going to be sitting with the committee and something they're going to have to consider um, this next couple of weeks as we see what the rankings are on Tuesday. But then it's also what happens in the conference championship games will matter. But the argument is essentially this: Texas played Ohio State week 1. At the time, Ohio State was number 3 in the country. They obviously moved up to number 1 after beating Texas, and they have never relinquished that spot. They're playing for a Big Ten title against Indiana next week. Perfect 12-0, number 1 team in the country. Texas outgained Ohio State by over 130 yards in that game. They lost by 7, had the ball with a chance to tie it late. Game really could have gone either way when you look at the box score. Post-game win expectancy, Texas was over 50% to win that game. If Texas does not play that game, and let's say they play any Power 4 non-ranked opponent in that spot, say they play Baylor, right, and win the game, and Texas is sitting here at 10-2, as Steve Sarkisian correctly said, we're not even having a discussion. Texas is in the playoff at 10-2 with wins over 3 top 10 teams at the time of playing them. And so Oklahoma, Vandy, and A&M. And so, if you leave Texas out, which I'll preface this by saying I believe Texas is going to get left out. I don't know whether it's fair or not. It's hard to say when you have a team like BYU who has just 1 loss, or you have a team like Miami who did challenge themselves in the non-conference as well, and they have 2 losses. But it begs the question of why play these games if we're going to count these against teams who lose them. Texas did not get blown out by Ohio State. Texas was arguably just as good as Ohio State in the game for the majority of that game. They lose the game. That is the difference in them missing the playoff. Now, the argument can be made they should have never lost to Florida, right? They got their doors blown off by Georgia. That one you can understand, on the road against Georgia. The Florida loss, yes, absolutely should not have lost to Florida. Florida is not a good football team. They finished with 4 wins this season, fired their head coach, Billy Napier. But if you just look at the Ohio State game, right, even with the Florida loss, that's the thing. You can say, yes, they shouldn't have lost to Florida. You can say, yes, they shouldn't have gone to overtime with Mississippi State and Kentucky. But they did, and they won those 2 games. They lost to Florida. And if they had lost to Florida and not played Ohio State, they still would have been in. So the issue still remains. Why play these games? If Texas gets left out, which, again, they very likely will, teams are going to say, why would we play these non-conference opponents, non-conference games against top opponents? A&M and Notre Dame, same type of deal, right? Why would they play that game if they know, okay, that 1 loss could be the difference between us making a playoff and not making a playoff? Because Texas is absolutely in at 10-2. Without a doubt, even losing to Florida, they would be in the playoff. And we're going to see a really, really interesting debate go on where Texas likely gets left out, and we're talking about going forward, teams pulling out of these games. We saw Indiana essentially do it, right? Indiana plays absolutely nobody in the non-conference because they know as long as they win those 4 games, they can afford to lose 1, maybe 2 games in conference and get to the playoff regardless. They're going to make it as easy as possible because regardless of what the committee says, they focus on wins and losses. Yes, to an extent, right? Like BYU has 1 loss and they're sitting on the outside looking in right now. But essentially, if you're in a Power 4 conference and you're one of the better teams in a Power 4 conference, right, they are going to look at wins and losses. And the problem with the committee is they're going to pick and choose when those games matter and when they don't. For example, they're going to say, looking at Notre Dame and Miami, for Notre Dame, well, they played Miami early in the year, and Notre Dame now is a different team. So that game doesn't matter for Notre Dame. But Texas losing to Ohio State, it does matter because it was their 3rd loss, right? So we're picking and choosing what games matter and what don't in the non-conference, and that's the problem with it. We'll move on from Texas and Texas A&M, but interesting to see what happens and how it plays out. I think most people most people believe and know Texas is going to get left out of the playoff, and we're going to have this issue of teams not wanting to play these tough non-conference opponents going forward, at least until we get to some sort of expansion to 16 or even 24 teams. Moving on quickly, Indiana defeats Purdue 56-3. Indiana and Ohio State will battle for the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis next week. That will determine the number 1 overall seed. The only interesting point from that would be, is Indiana or Ohio State, whoever loses that game, going to drop out of the top 4 with a loss? I would guess no. The committee last year kind of showed they don't really penalize teams for losing in their conference championship games. And so I think whoever loses that game likely will fall to the 3 seed. I don't see anyone overtaking Indiana or Ohio State, especially if it's a close loss, except Georgia. If Georgia wins the SEC championship and beats Alabama, finishes 12-1, I believe the loser of that game between Indiana, Ohio State would fall below Georgia. That, I think, would be the only drop. But if Georgia were to lose to Alabama, then I think there's a very real possibility that if Indiana loses a very tight game to Ohio State or vice versa, that they still finish 1-2 in the standings. Moving on, number 4, Georgia defeats number 23, Georgia Tech, 16-9. The line in this game opened 13.5. We saw a lot of professional money come in on the Bulldogs, pushed it up over 14, closed 15.5 in a lot of spots. And I think a lot of people thought Georgia was just going to dominate Georgia Tech in this game. And that's far from what happened. Final score was 16-9. Yes, it's a rivalry game. Yes, weird things happen. Last year, this game went to 8 overtimes, right? And Georgia Tech was not as good as they were this year when they played last year. But Georgia Tech has not played good football the last month of the season. They struggled, barely got past Boston College, lost last week in kind of embarrassing fashion to Pittsburgh. So, you could chalk this up to a rivalry game. A little concerning, Gunnar Stockton was 11 for 21 for 70 yards, a touchdown and a pick, a 25.4 QBR. Georgia was outgained by over a yard per play, five yards per play for Georgia Tech, just 3.9 for the Bulldogs. So as good as Georgia's looked in the second half of the season, little concerning the way they looked going into that one. Now, easy to overlook that. They've dominated Georgia Tech historically. They're already in the SEC title game. Their fate was already sealed. They had finished their SEC schedule, and they needed once A&M lost, they were in the SEC title game. So the game was kind of meaningless to them in that sense. Moving on, most interesting one, not because of the game. Ole Miss, number 7 in the country, finishes the season 11-1, defeating Mississippi State 38-19. It broke tonight. Lane Kiffin heading to Baton Rouge. He will be the new head coach of LSU. The question now, will he coach in the college football playoff? This is a absurd, crazy scenario, and you can hate Lane Kiffin, and I think this is brutal for Ole Miss, and I think that Lane probably made the wrong decision here. You'd think he'd learn from the previous decision when he did basically the same thing and left Tennessee and went to USC. We know how that turned out for him. He revived his career here at Ole Miss. He has finally gotten them to a playoff. They are in the playoff. They're not playing in the SEC title game. They're 11-1. They're a lock. And now you're going to leave to LSU. But I have to say, as much as I want to blame Lane Kiffin, and as much as I do somewhat blame Lane Kiffin, you have to blame the system. It's a broken system. We should not be having coaches being interviewed and being taken away from their programs in the middle of the season, in the middle of this playoff run. Lane Kiffin should not have to decide if he wants to go take the job of his dreams, right, or coach his team in the college football playoff. Those two things should not be connected. He should be able to finish the season, coach Ole Miss, go to the playoff, and then after the season, then is when they should make the decision. And I understand with the transfer portal and how it works and the dates and all of that, that is not possible. And that's why Ole Miss probably doesn't want him to coach. It's why probably LSU doesn't want him to coach. But they could fix the entirety of the system by just moving the dates, right? How about once the national championship is over, that's when the portal opens. That's when coaches can be recruited. Yes, maybe the window becomes smaller, maybe becomes more difficult. And I understand there's issues with the semester and with academics. None of these guys go to school anyway at this point in those Power Four conferences, right? Very few schools or academics matter at all anymore. These guys are professional athletes. They're paid hundreds of thousands and up to millions of dollars now. Okay. We need to get this right. It's ridiculous. It is absolutely absurd that Lane Kiffin is coaching a game to clinch a spot in the playoff, while at the same time we're talking about, is he going to be here next week? Or is he going to be coaching for a different program? Not only a different program in the same conference. That needs to be fixed as well. Coaches shouldn't be able to leave straight to a rival in the middle of the season. It's crazy. This is a broken system. Until it gets fixed, it's hard to blame the coaches. We see the players doing the same thing, right? Players, can get a redshirt year now if they play in less than 4 games. So 3 games in, if they decide I don't like it here or a coach leaves, they can say, you know what, I'm going to take a break and I'm going to leave this program and save my year of eligibility and go transfer to another program and just completely desert the team. There is no loyalty from the players. So it's not as though these players are hurt. All these players can leave just like Lane Kiffin can leave. But it hurts the sanctity of the sport, the respect of the sport, the dignity of the sport, that we're going to have essentially a team who, for all intents and purposes, is a championship contender, right? This is a pretty wide open year. Yes, Ohio State looks like the best team. Indiana probably looks like the second best team. I understand, those 2 teams are probably far and away better than anybody else. Georgia's up there as well. Ole Miss led Georgia by 9 in Athens in the 4th quarter earlier this year. They ended up losing by 8. This is a wide open year, and Ole Miss has as good a shot at anybody as winning a national championship if they're mentally there. You add this in, even if Lane coaches now, the weight of that and the players knowing that, I have a hard time seeing Ole Miss really competing now, and that sucks because I want to see the best teams play. I want to see teams compete and have a chance to win a national championship like Ole Miss. That's what makes this new system fun. A team like Ole Miss can get in the playoffs because they have a coach like Lane Kiffin, and they have a chance to actually win a national championship, and that's ruined by this shitty system and the way this is handled. We're seeing the same thing at North Texas with Eric Morris, right? He's basically been announced as the new Oklahoma State head coach. He's going to coach the rest of the year. They're going to play in the American Championship this week or next week. And if they win, they're headed to the playoff. And he's in the same position Lane is in, only he is coaching, right? It's a little different in a program like that. And North Texas has never had been anywhere close to a college football playoff. That would have been unheard of going into this season, right? And so the system needs to be fixed. Moving on quickly, Utah defeats Kansas 31-21. Look, Utah should not be considered for the college football playoff. The fact that Utah was currently ranked going into this week ahead of Vandy and Texas is an absolute joke. It's an absolute joke. Utah has 0 wins this season against teams who are currently ranked in the top 25 of the college football playoff rankings. 0. They played Texas Tech at home and got absolutely smashed. And Texas Tech had their backup quarterback for half the game. And they played BYU and got beat. They should not be in a playoff. They shouldn't be considered. Putting Utah ahead of Texas, ahead of Vandy, ahead of Vandy makes absolutely no sense. Ahead of Texas shows that they just look at record and not at the actual teams, because Texas' resume, even with 3 losses, is far superior to Utah's, right? And they're 3 spots below them. Vandy's 1 spot below them. Vandy's 10-2 in the SEC, right? Only 2 losses are to Texas and Alabama, both on the road. How on earth is Utah number 13? It's crazy. Kudos to Kyle Whittingham. He's done a great job there. 10-win season, impressive for Utah, good for them. They don't deserve to be anywhere near the college football playoff. They should be 15, 16, 17. I do believe, given that Texas went in and beat A&M, and the fact that you had Vandy go on the road and absolutely dominate top 20 ranked Tennessee, their rival, I think you're going to see both those teams jump Utah this week in the college football playoff rankings. So I don't think it matters. But the fact that they were ranked ahead of them at all is crazy. And by the way, the Big 12 commissioner is the head of the college football playoff committee. Moving on to Saturday, Ohio State, number 1 team in the land, defeats number 15 Michigan, 27-9. It started off 6-0 Michigan. Ohio State outscored Michigan the rest of the first half, 17-3, and then they outscored them 10-0 in the second half. So it was 27-3 after that first 6-0 lead. But kudos to Ohio State, because you get down 6-0. Julian Sand throws an interception on his second possession of the game, and it looks all of a sudden, or on his first possession of the game rather, and it looks all of a sudden like, here we go again. Is this going to be Ohio State mentally unable to get past this hurdle of beating Michigan? But quickly, Ohio State turned on the gas, got a field goal on the next possession, kind of settled in, then back-to-back touchdowns to close the half. And just like that, they were in complete control of this game. They cruised to a victory. Michigan out of the playoff, out of the picture here. They'll be playing in some bowl game. But, Michigan needs to take a long look in the mirror and decide if Sherrone Moore is the right guy for the job, because the honest answer to that is he's probably not. He's not done a good job there. Yes, they went 9-3 this year. Yes, technically, if they won this game, they were in the college football playoff. But you look at their schedule, right? Who are the teams they beat? New Mexico, Central Michigan, Nebraska by 3, Wisconsin, Washington, Michigan State, Purdue, Northwestern, and Maryland, right? The only good teams they played this year were Oklahoma in game 2, lost by double digits. USC, middle of the season, lost by 18. And Ohio State, the final game of the year, lost by 18. Lost all 3 games against ranked opponents by double digits, right? And so they're not a team competing for a national championship. They're nowhere close. I understand Bryce Underwood is young. I understand when Harbaugh left, it's a new, different program. It's going to take a little bit of time. But the reality is Michigan is not a national title contender since Jim Harbaugh left. And if they want to continue being a national title contender or get back to that point, I think they need to find a new head coach. Moving on. And as I mentioned, real quick, Ohio State, again, will be taking on Indiana in the Big Ten championship game. That will be for the number 1 overall seed. Texas Tech, number 5 in the country, absolutely dominates West Virginia, as they should. 49-0, shut them out. That's still an impressive scoreline against anybody to pitch a shutout in a Division I FBS game, Power 4 game. West Virginia's horrible, 2-7 in the Big 12. Tech did what they were supposed to. Here's the interesting thing for Texas Tech. Are they going to get a bye? Because I do believe A&M is going to drop out of the top 10. Now, I would make the argument, out of the top 4. I would make the argument, and this is going to hurt them, but I could argue that Ole Miss and Oregon both deserve to be ahead of Texas Tech. Texas Tech's in the Big 12. Oregon's in the Big 10. Ole Miss is in the SEC. I think Ole Miss, of all teams, is a team that deserves to be in the top 4 above Texas Tech. 11-1 team, SEC, lone loss to Georgia on the road, 1-score game, led by 9 in the fourth quarter. Obviously, the Lane Kiffin thing is probably going to hinder them from that happening. Oregon doesn't have any great wins, so I can understand, Tech and Oregon, you're splitting the hairs there. But I think they're probably going to give the fourth bye to Texas Tech, which is going to really help them, because I don't think they're the 4th best team in the country at all. I think they're more like the 10th best team in the country. But good kudos to Texas Tech. Heck of a year. 1 loss. They're going to play for a Big 12 title next week. Rematch against BYU. That's BYU's only loss of the season. Going to get back to that game in a second. Oregon beats Washington 26-14. Got a little dicey late. Became a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. Became a 1-score game in the fourth quarter. Oregon answered, put a touchdown on the board, and got it back to 12 and closed it out. Dante Moore, 20-29, 286 in the touchdown. I don't know what Oregon is. I weirdly think they're less of a title contender than some teams below them, like a Notre Dame, like an Alabama. Not that I think those 2 teams are legit contenders, like have a good shot, but I just don't see who Oregon beats on a neutral field of teams in the top 10, right? Like their best win is USC, right? Penn State, before Penn State found out they were really bad. So, I'm not really sure what this Oregon team is. I'm not really sure what Dante Moore is. And so I'm interested to see where they end up in the seeding. I think Oregon probably hosts a playoff game, gets through the first round, and that's about it. But we'll see. It depends on the matchup. If they play Alabama or Notre Dame in the first round, good luck. I do not think they will get past either of those teams. Oklahoma, talk about luck. This is a team that was outgained by 200 yards at Alabama. They were outgained in the first half by Tennessee by 180 yards and were somehow winning by a touchdown. Today against LSU, LSU could not move the football. Absolutely horrific offensively, 198 total yards. And Oklahoma was trailing with 5 minutes to go in this game. And if it weren't for a busted coverage by LSU secondary, who played really good the entirety of the game, picked off John Mateer 3 times, Oklahoma's not in the college football playoff. This is the worst team of the at-large teams in the college football playoff. Kudos to Brent Venables. The defense is elite. Absolutely, they're really, really good. They beat some tough teams, and they did it on the road to get there. Went into Knoxville and won. Went into Tuscaloosa and won. Back-to-back weeks after losing to Ole Miss, then came back and beat Missouri at home and found a way to win this one. They've won ugly, but they've won, and now all of a sudden they're in the college football playoff. They are locked in. Obviously, number 8 going into this week, getting the win and getting to 10 wins. They're in the playoff. Bad news for teams like Vanderbilt and Texas who are on the outside looking in, but lucky win. LSU was right there to pull this massive upset and to really shake up the college football playoff heading into the final week with the championship Saturday. But they found a way. The Sooners found a way, to their credit. As of right now, if they finish at number 8, if they don't drop, which I have a hard time believing they don't, I kind of think they're going to put Notre Dame ahead of them. Or like say Alabama beats Georgia in the SEC title game. Alabama, I believe, would jump Oklahoma. I would venture to guess Oklahoma is going to host a playoff game, but we'll see. They're at number 8 right now. If it ended today, they would host Notre Dame, which would be a really tough matchup for them. Speaking of Notre Dame, another team that is probably ranked ahead of where they should be. They're number 9 in the country. They take care of Stanford 49-20, all but clinching their spot in the college football playoff. Again, we're looking at this, and we see Miami sitting there at number 12, 10-2. Notre Dame sitting there at 9, 10-2. They played early in the season. Not only did Miami win that game, the box score was not nearly indicative of how dominant Miami was in that game. That was I believe it was 24-3 at one point. Notre Dame came back late. Miami was by far the better team the entirety of the game. They found a way to win at the end. And we're sitting here looking at record, right? We're talking about Texas's record. Well, they have 3 losses, so how can we put them in over a 2-loss or a 1-loss team? Well, if we're going to do that, then we have to look at every team equally. Miami and Notre Dame have the same record. Miami played a tougher schedule. Miami and Notre Dame played head-to-head, and Miami won. How on earth is Miami 3 spots below Notre Dame? If we're talking about, because Notre Dame, you're talking about, okay, the eye test. Yes, they look like a really good team. They look like a playoff team. They look better than Miami. But the resume, they're not better than Miami. And so what are we looking at then? Are we looking at how teams are playing? Are we looking at what they look like? Or are we looking at the total body of work? And are we looking at early games the same as in late games? Because if we're not counting early games, why does Texas' loss to Ohio State matter? Again, we pick and choose. The College Football Playoff Committee does. They pick and choose what matters and what doesn't to fit their narrative. And they've decided Notre Dame is a playoff team, and they're going to put them in the playoff. That's why they're number 9. They're never dropping out after winning 49-20. And it's just how it's going to go. Notre Dame's going to get in the playoff. They're going to steal a spot from somebody who has played a much tougher schedule, who has to play in a real conference and doesn't get to schedule whoever they want. Notre Dame's best win is USC, right? Similar to Oregon. Lost their only 2 games of the season against, ranked playoff teams or potential playoff teams, A&M and Miami. And that A&M game was at home, and they lost. Whether they should have won or not, they lost the game at home to A&M. Alabama, talk about another team that was lucky, survives Auburn. And what a ballsy call by Kalen DeBoer. It was 20-20 in the fourth quarter with under 5 minutes to play. And Kalen DeBoer decides, instead of kicking a field goal on 4th down and 2 at the 5-yard line, to go for it and go for a touchdown. And on 4th and 2, Ty Simpson delivered and found a man in the end zone for a touchdown. Bama scored. They were able to get the stop on the final possession from Auburn. And Alabama is locked its spot in the SEC title game and likely in the college football playoff. Crazy ending to that game. If Bama does not convert there, I honestly think they have Kalen DeBoer's head on a spike in Tuscaloosa this week. If they don't convert that and Auburn goes down and kicks a field goal and wins the game by 3, I don't know how Kalen DeBoer survives that. I mean, at the very least, he's fired. He'd be lucky to get out of Tuscaloosa with his life. That was a ballsy decision. And DeBoer is usually pretty even keeled, and you could see him on the sideline after they scored the touchdown. They showed the replay, and it was the biggest exhale I've ever seen him take in his life. I guess he thought, we're not gonna kick a field goal here and give our rival a chance to go win it with a touchdown. We're going to go for it right here. And if we don't get it, we're going to trust our defense can get a stop. But man, that was a ballsy call, and it paid off. Alabama wins it 27-20. They're going to the SEC title game. They're in the playoff more than likely. Kudos to them. Kalen DeBoer can breathe a sigh of relief, at least for one more week. At least till he loses to Georgia next week, and Legend is back on the phone lines on Paul Feinbaum calling for his job. Okay, BYU. BYU trailed 14-0 today against Central Florida. They end up winning the game 41-21. Final score looks good. This is an interesting one. They're 11-1, and I will say this: last year I made the case that if SMU lost to Clemson in the conference title game at 11-1, that they deserve to still be in, and they should not be left out for a 3-loss Alabama. And I look at BYU this year, and I honestly feel the opposite. I truly believe if they lose to Texas Tech, they should not be in the playoff. Their lone ranked win this season is a 3-point win at home against Utah. The only other ranked team they played was Texas Tech on the road, and they got beat by 22. They, got outgained by Cincinnati. Trailed by 14 against Iowa State, trailed by 14 against Colorado, and found a way to win late in overtime. Fumbled in overtime, an inch away from losing to Colorado. Won that game by 3. Beat Arizona by 6. Beat Utah by 3. Right? This is a team that is squeaked by opponent after opponent. The luck factor is very high for BYU, and now they face Texas Tech in the conference title game. Now, if BYU loses a close game to Texas Tech, I can understand the argument that they deserve to be in. If they get the doors blown off like they did if they lose by 2 touchdowns or more, this team does not belong in the college football playoff. And Big 12 fans will hate to hear that, and they'll argue that it's SEC bias and Big 10 bias. But the fact of the matter is, if BYU was in the Big 10, or specifically in the SEC, if they would be lucky to be a bowl team. They had lucky to be 6-6. They squeaked by a lot of really subpar and bad teams in the Big 12. They lost their really only good against their only good opponent. Yes, they beat Utah. How good is that win? By 3. It's a rival at home. But I think this game matters. I really do. I think if BYU gets blown out, I think they get left out. I think the committee will do that because the difference is last year with SMU, the teams on SMU's heels had 3 losses. The teams on BYU's heels, with the exception of Texas, all have 2 losses. Miami, Vanderbilt, right? Those 2 teams at 2 losses, specifically Vanderbilt, but both of them, they're better teams. They'd be favored against BYU right now. They're in better conferences. They've played tougher schedules. They have better wins. They have better losses. BYU does not deserve to be in the playoff if they get killed in the Big 12 title game. So that's my take on it. Will they get in? I don't know. I think the best chance for them is just to win the Big 12 championship game, because if they don't, going to be a lot of discussion about whether the Mormons deserve to be in the college football playoff. Miami makes a statement with their win. They take down number 22 Pittsburgh 38-7. Pittsburgh. This was a road game for Miami. Is it too little, too late? Maybe, right? Miami. You can't lose the games they lost. I understand that because it's not just 2 losses. It's 2 losses to teams that you're a big favorite against. At home against Louisville was such a bad loss. At SMU was a pretty bad loss. Although SMU is playing for an ACC championship game, they're 8-4. I'm sorry, SMU. SMU is not. I'm sorry, SMU missed a field goal at the end of regulation. They're not playing for an ACC championship game. So they lost to two teams in a bad conference who were nowhere near playing for a conference title. You know, yes, they beat Notre Dame early in the season. I know they have that win against South Florida, but it's just those are two games you can't lose. And so, yeah, kudos to them. They dominated their last four opponents, but it was Syracuse, NC State, Virginia Tech, and Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh was the only half decent team they played. Pittsburgh finished 8-4. Okay, so if Miami gets left out, you know, I kind of think if you can't reach the conference championship game in the ACC, I mean, it's Virginia and Duke, for God's sake. Virginia and Duke are playing in the ACC championship game. Miami sitting at home with all the money they spend on recruits and coaching staff and all that stuff. And they're sitting at home while the Duke Blue Devils and the Virginia Cavaliers are playing for the ACC title game. To me, that alone should kind of disqualifies Miami. That said, I also think that they should be in over Notre Dame, right? The team that I think deserves to be ahead of them is Vanderbilt. I think Vanderbilt deserves to be in the playoff, and that's who I'll come to next. Vanderbilt absolutely annihilates Tennessee, their rival, beats them 45-24. Tennessee was a 3-point favorite in this game. A lot of people, especially professional bettors, love Tennessee in this spot. Vanderbilt got down early 21-14 and did not look back. They outscored them 24-3 the remainder of the game. Diego Pavia, I believe, cemented himself as a Heisman finalist in this game. He was phenomenal. 18-28, 268 yards and a touchdown, 93 QBR, ran for 165 yards and a touchdown. The guy deserves to be in New York for the Heisman ceremony. He's not going to win it. They're going to give it to Mendoza. But to me, you have a kid who took Vanderbilt from the garbage, the dumpster of the SEC to 6-2 in the SEC, the first 10-win season in Vanderbilt Commodore history, on the verge of making the college football playoff. They should be in the playoff, even though they're probably going to get left out. He deserves to be in New York. Tennessee is in trouble. They need to regroup. They're calling for Heupel's job over there. I think that's a bit extreme. They were in the playoff last year, but this was a bad loss. This wasn't just a loss. This was an embarrassing loss to your rival who has never been close to the program that you are in football. And now the last 2 years, they're a better program than you over the last couple of years. Under Clark Lee, I would be fearful if I was Tennessee going forward that Vanderbilt's going to be the best program in Tennessee over the next couple of years, assuming Clark Lee stays there. But Vanderbilt, heck of a season. If they get left out, it's really sad. It's a great story. Everybody would love to see Pavia and that team in the college football playoff. If they get left out, it's just going to be, and this is the problem with the system, right? Like, I like that North Texas has a shot to get in. I like that Tulane has a shot to get in. It would be way more fun to watch Diego Pavia and company play in the playoff than it would be to watch North Texas or Tulane get stomped in the first round, which is what will happen, right? It's going to probably be A&M at that 5 seed, and you're going to be going to College Station if you're Tulane or North Texas. So, Vanderbilt, heck of a season. Congrats to them. I hope they find a way to get in. My guess is they end up getting left out. And that's pretty much it for teams. I'll go one more. USC defeated UCLA, but they're obviously out of the playoff picture. Virginia, 10-2. They win it 27-7 over Virginia Tech, and they clinch their spot in the ACC title game. They will take on the Duke Blue Devils, as I mentioned before, because SMU, who came into this game 8-3 and controlling their own destiny for an ACC title game, got down by 20-plus points to Cal before mounting a crazy comeback. They actually took the lead late in the fourth quarter before Cal took it right back. SMU had a 52-yard field goal as time expired to tie the game and send it to overtime. It was wide right. SMU's going home. That means the Duke Blue Devils at 7-5 are going to the ACC title game and have a legitimate shot to make the college football playoff, because remember, the winner of the ACC gets into the college football playoff. So Duke wins. I just realized this causes a really interesting scenario. If Duke, remember, it's the top 5 ranked conference champions. Virginia's currently sitting at number 18. They're 10-2. If Virginia beats Duke in the ACC title game, they are in the playoff. However, Duke sits at 7-5. Right now, the winner of Tulane and North Texas will get a spot in the college football playoff because they will be the highest ranked group of 5 school. Looking at it right now, the next highest ranked conference champion, if they're able to win, is James Madison. James Madison is 11-1. If James Madison wins the Sun Belt and Duke upsets Virginia, I think there's a legitimate shot that James Madison gets in the playoff and Duke does not. Because I believe James Madison at 12-1 versus Duke at 8-5 is going to be ranked higher in the college football playoff rankings. So there's a legitimate opportunity. There's a legitimate possibility because Duke's not going to be a huge underdog against Virginia. It's going to be like a field goal. That if Duke wins that game, that James Madison and North Texas or Tulane both get in the college football playoff. That's crazy. That would be a wild, wild scenario. And I've already mentioned Tulane. They beat Charlotte. North Texas took care of their opponent. And so those two teams are going to be playing for their conference championship. James Madison's the other team. And then you've got a wild scenario in the Mountain West where New Mexico, San Diego State, Boise State, and UNLV are all tied and for the Mountain West. And they're going to use a combination of 4 computer rankings. And the 2 highest computer ranked teams will play for the Mountain West championship game. It's a weird deal. It's how they've always done it. And that's how the Mountain West championship will be decided. We won't find that out until 9 a.m. It's currently, I'm shooting this at 5 in the morning. So we won't find that out for another 4 hours, but we'll know in the morning who is playing for the Mountain West title game. My feeling is it's going to be a rematch of last year. Unfortunately, it's going to be BYU and UNLV. I'm hoping it's UNLV in New Mexico, but I would love San Diego State as well. I don't want to see Boise in it. We're tired of seeing Boise. They're not a very good team this year. Would much rather see some fresh blood play for a Mountain West championship game. But one of those teams, right? If James Madison loses, they're alive for the college football playoff. Going to get real interesting down the stretch here. That's my recap. That's my breakdown. I'll come back tomorrow to break down, or on Tuesday rather, to break down the college football playoff rankings after they come out. Hope you guys enjoyed this content. If you're new to the channel, again, subscribe, like this video if you enjoy it, and comment below. Who do you think gets left out? Who do you think gets in? Who deserves to be in? Anything you want to talk about in college football playoff, I'll respond to all the comments below. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys for the next video.